I think what works in demand gen is not demand gen. It's the fact that with that demand gen approach, people stop thinking about how am I going to get people to convert, and they start thinking about who are these people and what should we say to them. And that's just because they start doing marketing. It's not the demand gen part.
This is the Inbound4Cast, a podcast series about inbound marketing and organic growth for B2B companies. Here's your host, Gerald Arcus.
Vince, welcome to my show.
Thanks
How
for
are you
having me.
doing?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you.
Great. Calling from France.
Yeah. I'm French. I have this. It's a default I have.
I think you are my second French. Well, I'm not sure. I had Jason Barnard on my show, and I think he's living in France right now, but I'm not sure. I don't think he is from France. I think he's from the UK. SEO guy who does a lot with branded SEO.
Yeah. I don't know.
All right. We are talking today about, I think, mainly about demand generation. You reached out to me on LinkedIn with an article because you saw demand generation in my job title or in my description. And you sent me an article, you written about it, I read it, and you have a different opinion than most people I see on LinkedIn on demand generation. I like people with a different opinion, and I agree with a lot of things that you say, so I thought that's interesting for my podcast. But before we start with that, maybe you can give an introduction of yourself and share one thing that most people don't know about you.
Should I start with the intro or with the thing that people don't know then? Okay, so I'm Vince. I'm the founder and CEO of Scale Crush. We are an SEO and content marketing agency, and we mostly cater to B2B SaaS companies. I've been in SEO and content for the better part of a decade. And we're a small premium agency. Some things, I have two things people don't know about me. The first one is probably that I play guitar in a ska punk band. So that's one of my hobbies. And the second would be that I dropped out of a PhD at McGill University. And that PhD was in French medieval literature. So it has nothing to do with marketing at all.
So it was a good thing that you stopped with it, maybe.
It depends who you ask.
Yeah, but it's strange. I talk to a lot of people with an SEO background. Also, a lot of people who don't do SEO right now anymore. But I had a podcast recording before this. He also is doing something completely different. But I think the SEO background is good.
Yeah, well, I entered SEO by content because I had this background in literature and all. When I first started looking for a job, I looked for a job in content. That was one of my skills. And so from there, I kind of learned SEO on the job because I worked for an agency. And then I moved to like SEO consultant, as people call themselves. And then I ended up doing, freelance gigs and stuff. And yeah, SEO has been a fun ride. What I find most exciting about it is how it constantly shifts. Like it's always evolving. When I started working on SEO 10 years ago, we did mostly the same things, but the world was very different online. And that's really cool to be. It requires you to just go with the flow, which can also be really hard sometimes. But yeah.
Yeah. And why did you start your own company?
I think that's a tough one, but I have a problem. So if you look at the content on our website, there's also a piece that I wrote that's called Why Buying SEO and Content Feels Impossible and What You Can Do About It. And I think that's what also prompted me to start an agency, is that the agencies I worked for in the past were very bad at delivering anything, basically. And I wanted to do something that's a little bit different, that doesn't rely on outsourcing the work to the cheapest freelancer you can find on Upwork, right? That doesn't require you to pressure people to keep your margins up and stuff. So I wanted to do something where yes, we're a premium agency, we charge a lot of money, but I'm okay with that, and I want people to be okay with that and be okay with like the quality of work and the quality of the advising, the consulting that we can provide as well. So I just wanted to offer myself, my employees, and clients a different experience. I think. I hope I'm kind of succeeding at that. I'm not sure, but
well, I'm not from France, so I'm not sure too. But I like your content. And I think that's a big problem for a lot of agencies, right? So you get a junior person with not a lot of experience, you pay a lot of money, and you don't get the quality that you should have. Yeah. And then because of that, you don't like SEO anymore.
Yeah, people end up. So the whole piece I wrote is about that. Like people end up blaming it on the category, and I mean that's fair, right? Because everyone has a marketing agency horror story, and so the piece I'm going to spoil it, but the piece ends up with two things that we can do. One that we can do as marketing agencies is to stop over promising things, right? And the conversation about demand generation is kind of tied to that, in my opinion. And we can start by we can stop over promising things, and we can stop trying to get clients and trying to hype up everything, basically. And on the client side, they also need to step up. They need to understand that they can't get a full service marketing agency for $1,500 a month. And that's not going to happen, right? Because the only way that happens is you get shared work. So,
yep.
Everyone has their part to play. And I think the number one thing that clients can do and marketers can do in general is to stop believing the BS that the industry is putting out and start questioning it to understand what is actually true, what is not true. And we're actually starting a newsletter that's called Marketing Self-Defense, and it's going to help with that. So just how should we believe the marketing jargon, the marketing theory that we see out there, and how can we defend ourselves from the stuff that is just not true? And
maybe I like your content because of that. Because because of my SEO background, I see a lot of bullshit too. A lot.
Yeah.
And I hate it. A lot of people don't understand it, but they write for the biggest content platforms in the Netherlands, and all the companies believe them, and they think that SEO works in a way that, it doesn't work that way. But
well, and it's much easier as a client. Like it's always the same. It's much easier to believe the guy who says what you want to hear, right? And I could be saying to everyone, I'm going to guarantee the results, and you're going to rank number one. And this is all only going to cost $10,000 per year. I can make that promise. It's easy to believe, but at the same time, we need to be better than that, and we need to understand that not everything is believable. And at the end of the day, one thing that people do not understand and do not know, and I'm trying to be more vocal about this as well, is that most agencies are not making any money whatsoever. Like, I have a big agency because we're like 4 people plus 2 interns, so that's 6 people, full-time people, right? So for an agency, it's big because most agencies you see out there are like one owner plus an army of freelancers that they pay, per gig. So we have a big agency. We're making something like $500,000 in revenue, which is, again, very small business for an agency, pretty big, right? The net margin at the end of the day is probably at the end of the year, 10%, right? 10%, but it's not 10% of 30 million. It's 10% of $500,000. So you're left with like, it's not like we're making huge amounts of money off of everyone's work or back or whatever.
Yeah, and I understand because
why.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I had my own agency as well, and I can say from my experience, it's better to be a freelancer if you want to make a lot of money in a short amount of time. But there's other benefits of having an agency, but at the short term, money is not one of them, I think.
Exactly. And I think if clients understood that, and marketers in general understood that, then they'd realize that the reason so many agencies are bad is because they're just trying to keep their margins up. So the best way to do that is to cut people costs, because at the end, what we're doing is selling people. So if you cut on people costs, and instead of taking, hiring talented people full time, you just take average freelancers when you need them, then you make more money, but you do very bad quality work. And so, that's a vicious circle that keeps on spinning. And so I wanted to try and break that vicious circle in a sense. But it's a tough endeavor for sure.
Yeah, but I like the way you think with that.
Thanks.
Then let's go to demand generation.
Yeah.
I read your article and I have a quote here in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
I liked it. You said, "I think demand generation doesn't exist." And
I do.
Just by reading that, I thought I have to talk to him. So you said the definition doesn't make sense. You can't generate demand.
No.
And you say a lot of other things, but yeah, maybe you can take me through the article.
Yeah, sure. So before I do that, I have to say I've had this discussion numerous times with a lot of people, and I haven't heard any kind of argument that can make me question what I'm about to say. I haven't. Like, I've talked with a lot of people, and I haven't seen anything that makes sense. And usually what happens is that people just stop responding because they're out of arguments. And they want to believe, because there's something called cognitive dissonance, which pushes us to tell ourselves stories instead of actually accepting reality. So the reason I don't think demand generation exists is I don't think you can generate demand. If you think about it, I mean, it's not if you think about it, it's the definition of demand. It's wants plus needs. So someone has to want something and someone has to need something. Okay. So, and this is very important. It's not just wants, or it's not just needs, right? For example, people may want to have a pizza oven that also functions as an alarm clock, but they don't need one. Okay. Because demand is wants plus needs, how can you generate demand? How can you create demand in the market? There is only, I lied. There is one way to do that. One way to create demand, and it's to create a problem, because people will then want and need a solution to that problem. So there are multiple examples of that throughout history. If you want an old example of that, you take the shampoo industry in the 50s, telling women, running big advertising campaigns to tell women that washing their hair only once a week was really bad. So what they did is they created demand for shampoo because they created a problem. Your hair is actually really filthy if you only wash it once a week, and if you don't wash it with the product, that's creating a problem. Another example, which is maybe less ethical or politically correct, is Coca-Cola putting caffeine in Coke, right? They're creating a problem. They're creating the addiction, and then you have to buy Coke to fulfill your addiction. Another fun example is the gold rush, right? During the gold rush, who made the most money? People selling shovels and people selling mining equipment, because that the problem was there. The want and the need was there. If you don't have wants and needs, you don't have demand. So you cannot create demand for a product that doesn't exist, right? So then the argument that people use at this stage is, oh yeah, but Steve Jobs, and it's always the same. It's always Steve Jobs and the iPhone, right? But Steve Jobs created demand for the iPhone because he created a product that didn't exist. Yeah. So my answer to that is, so the argument is basically, if the product doesn't exist, then creating the product creates the demand. So I have to ask a question that invalidates this argument completely. If there was a way right now for you to teleport yourself from wherever you're living to the bottom of the Tour Eiffel in Paris, would you do it? And you go like, yeah, sure. If it's a safe way, I'd do it. There is demand for a very fast, faster mode of transportation, safer mode of transportation. There is the demand. We just don't have the product. The fact that the product doesn't exist doesn't implies that the demand doesn't exist, right? It doesn't.
Yeah, that's a good one, because I think that's the case in a lot of examples I see. The problem is already there. The demand is there. Yeah. You just are the first solution that people see of a company who can fix the problem. And then maybe they need to be a little bit convinced that your solution is the best. So can't that be demand generation? The problem is already there, the demand is there, but your solution for the problem, you can create demand for that.
So exactly, that's the next thing, the next argument in line. The next argument in line is, I am not creating demand in the market. I am creating demand for my company. Okay? And I think that is a very misleading argument. It's the one you just made, right? One, this is not at all what these people claim they're doing. Not at all. They are claiming to create market demand, right? In their narrative, this is what they're doing.
I used this argument a few times before, the argument you are giving. So then I said van, okay, but for me, I don't believe too in creating real demand for the product or service. I do believe in creating demand for people, for the company, for the content that you create.
Great.
But why don't we call it branding then? Why does it need a new name?
Then this is my question, is if this is what you're claiming to do, why are you calling it demand generation, right? And the fact that you're calling it demand generation shows that this is not what you're claiming to do. Otherwise, you just call it brand awareness, the way we've called that for the past, I don't know, 100 years or something, right?
Yeah, no,
so that doesn't
to be honest,
really make sense either.
I like what it stands for. I like what people do with demand generation. I think it's maybe a bit too specific. So it's a very specific framework, and it's also became big based on maybe even some lies about inbound marketing and lead generation.
Yeah,
they frame lead generation in a way which maybe is lead generation for a lot of companies, but doesn't have to be lead generation. Lead generation can be very valuable and good marketing as well, I think. Not only low quality white papers at the top of the funnel of people who never are going to convert. So, yeah, I have some problems with that. But
well, I mean, and this is maybe a thing I didn't say, but I don't think demand generation doesn't work. I think what works when people do demand gen is not demand gen, and I can explain that pretty simply. I just want to make another argument for people who are not convinced at this time, and the argument is this: is if you claim you can generate demand, how do you measure it? How much? In other words, how much is one demand?
Okay,
right.
This one is interesting because you can measure it, but if you can't measure something, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right?
But I'm not the one claiming it exists, okay? And that's called reversal of the burden of proof. These people are claiming they can generate demand. These people need to back up their claim. I am not claiming I can generate demand, right? So that the reversal of the burden of proof. The burden of proof lies on whoever makes the claim, right?
Yeah,
if I make the claim that if I drop this glass specifically in my office, it's going to go up instead of down, then I need to be able to back up that claim and actually show it. And I can't hide behind we can't measure it, okay? So the argument people use to respond to that is, well, we measure it by leads, but wait, because they're not exactly the same leads, we only measure the real leads that are ready to buy. So only SQLs and not MQLs, because MQLs are bullshit, and you've been, that argument. Yep. So in the end, if what you're claiming to generate is demand, and what you actually measure it with are leads, then aren't you just generating leads, right?
Well,
what's the difference?
I see a lot of people on LinkedIn who call them opportunities and not sales qualified leads.
Okay, yeah, you can do that, but
that's a definition thing.
Yeah, I don't find that very convincing. And all these arguments piling up. I haven't seen anyone make any claim to counteract anything I've said. And so usually people will hide behind but it still works. I don't know. I think, I'm big into evidence-based marketing. So actually looking at data and research and understanding what works and what doesn't in marketing, so we can actually do more of what works and less of what doesn't. And some people in that community, and I can recommend a couple books, is say stuff like nonsensical jargon leads to nonsensical thinking, and nonsensical thinking leads to failure, right? So it's very important, because another argument people will make is like, oh yeah, but it's semantics. Yes, it is. It is semantics. But
I thought that was going to be, I thought that was going to be the end conclusion of this podcast.
Yeah. Well, I have a better, I think I have a, because, saying demand generation doesn't make sense. That's one thing. That's me being a prick, and that's fine. But I think we can do more of that. I think, like I said, what works in demand gen isn't demand gen. It's the fact that people actually do some kind of marketing work. We live in a world where 90-something percent of marketers do not have marketing training. Or if they have marketing training, it's like 5 classes that they took in business school with like a guy from the 60s who was on payroll with the school, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that's a whole different issue, but this is usually what happens. And so all of these marketers, when they come to jobs, they kind of go with the flow. They go with what's already there in companies, and they replicate what they see in companies. And they go out on social media, on LinkedIn, on the web, they listen to these podcasts and for advice, because they're not trying to properly do their job. And so they listen to whoever is the most convincing. It's usually the 30 to 40 something white guy with a beard and a podcast who is very handsome and speaks in a very eloquent manner, right? That's usually what happens. And if that guy happens to be filling their heads with BS, then, to sell his services, then so be it. And they replicate whatever they hear from that guy. Marketing has 3 components. Any marketing project, whatever you're doing, digital marketing, traditional marketing, whatever, has 3 components. The first one is diagnosis. We need to research the market, understand who we need to target, what these people are thinking, what their problems are, what they try to fix the problem, how do we fit against these alternatives, why would they choose one over the other, etc. That's called market research, right?
Yeah.
No one does that today in marketing departments. No one. The second thing is once we know that, we're going to put together a plan. We're going to strategize, and because we know who to target, we know who they are, we can understand how we reach them. We can tailor our positioning and messaging. We can do all that stuff to reach the right people. No one does that either. And then the third thing is execution. This is where you go, oh, should we do SEO, social? Should we do brand awareness campaign, TV advertising, display ads? Should we sponsor newsletters? Should we do et cetera, et cetera? Everyone does this. And what happens is people do not have 1 and 2, and they focus on 3. And when 3 doesn't work, they blame it on the tactic. SEO is dead. Lead generation is dead. Inbound marketing is dead. You need to switch to demand gen. You need to shift from A to Z, etc. The whole thing you see on LinkedIn all the time is because people didn't do 1 and 2.
I think you are right, but I think there's another part of the problem, and that is that all things work for a few years, and then everybody is doing it, and it doesn't work anymore. And I think that's also a little bit what happened with lead generation. And that's why we want something else now.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I think the discussion is still on number 3. When you say this works, this doesn't, okay, that's a tactic thing, okay? Like probably mailing DVDs at some point worked and it doesn't anymore. That's fine. You still have the same target audience. They still have the same problem. You're still fixing that problem, maybe in different ways, but it doesn't change the fact that you can still reach that target audience. What you're saying is, we can shift our strategy based on the market trends and stuff. And yeah, I agree with that. You should, definitely. But until people do 1 and 2, until people understand their customers and the problems they solve and what the alternatives are, and put together a plan to actually put that across to them, then until they do that, they're stuck with tactics. And what happens when you're stuck with tactics is that you think that every problem is a tactical problem. And so you go like, oh no, we can't do SEO because SEO doesn't work and it's too long term, right? Or, yeah, but what if we change our ad creative? Maybe that's why the ads aren't performing. Or, yeah, but this landing page is not properly optimized. Maybe we should optimize that, and then we see where the budget should go, right? And so that you go into busy work mode. This is busy work. Because you have you don't know what the market is, and you don't have a plan to reach your market. So obviously, you do that.
I had a conversation a few weeks ago with a company, and they hired an agency for inbound marketing, very big, famous Dutch agency. And it didn't work. It didn't get any results. And then they started A/B testing the landing page. But they didn't even have any traffic there. So, it's things like that that cause a lot of problems. And now they are looking for new ways how to get leads because this isn't working. But yeah.
But you see what I mean? They're stuck in that tactical execution mindset where what they need to do is stop everything. The problem is that this politically in organizations, it's really hard to do. Like if you were to hire someone like me and you want me to be the CMO of your startup and you ask me what the first move is, I'm going to be like, for 3 months, we're going to stop everything we're doing and we're going to rebuild whatever we're doing. And no one's going to hire me to do that because it's just politically, no one wants their marketing department to stop working for 3 months. But it's not.
The same company that I just talked about, I also said to them, what you are looking for doesn't exist. You have a wrong idea of what marketing is and what the results are in the short term that you can get with it.
Exactly.
And I didn't start working for them because they are still searching for something that they are not going to find.
Yeah. And I think most people, so that everything that I said leads me to say that actually most marketing departments in companies are not doing marketing. They're doing campaign management. And that's a very different skill set. That's a very different thing. And so what they need to do is to start doing marketing, which is, what is my product? What is the market? How am I going to put that product on the market, right? And this is where I go back to what I was saying. I think what works in demand gen is not demand gen. It's the fact that with that demand gen approach, people stop thinking about how am I going to get people to convert, and they start thinking about who are these people and what should we say to them? And that's just because they start doing marketing. It's not the demand gen part, right? It's because they start actually looking at the market and listening to people. And so the problem that I have, then the next question would be, well, Vince, if this is what you wanted to say, why are you shitting on demand gen? And it's because I think that demand gen complexifies something that is simple. And I'm going to go a little bit more nerdy here. There's a distinction people fail to make between simplicity and difficulty. So complexity and difficulty. Some things are, so complexity refers to how intellectually challenging something is, right? Does it have a lot of moving parts? Is it hard to grasp intellectually? And difficulty refers to how hard it is to execute. So for example, doing a 250 pounds deadlift is very simple, but very, very hard, right?
Yep.
Very hard. It takes years of training to be able to do that. But the idea of it,
I think it is.
Yeah, the idea of it is you just grab the bar and you lift it. It's really easy. If you want to build a nuclear power plant, it's both really complex and really, really hard to do as well, because there are many points of failure. All these people advocating for demand generation and becoming a media company, all that marketing BS, they're trying to make you think marketing is complex and easy. They're telling you the problem is that you didn't intellectually think of it the right way, but if you do and you buy my shit, it's going to be super easy, right? because demand generation is the way I had the playbook for demand generation. That's really easy. The reality of the world is that marketing is really, really simple, and it's really, really hard to do it correctly. It's simple because it is, one, identify the problem you solve. Two, identify how people talk about this problem. Three, say that back to them. Four, everywhere they are. Very simple. But that's really, really hard to do correctly. Every step here is hard. Nothing is complex, but it's really, really hard. And so because they do that, they create confusion in the market. They fill people's head with nonsense. And then we get stuck in a situation where marketing budgets and resources are allocated towards stuff that not only doesn't work, but has been proven not to work, and not allocated towards stuff that works and has been proven to work.
Well, but you say it doesn't work. Maybe you don't create the demand, but you create the sales qualified leads or the opportunities. So, and that's the most important thing, right?
Is it?
Well, that's a consequence of if you could create demand.
When I say is it, it's because marketing research shows that, so the term is short-term sales activation campaigns actually do not create long-term growth, or are really bad at creating long-term growth.
Yeah.
Okay. So, which is why I'm saying, are MQLs really what companies should be after?
The way I look at it is you can split B2B marketing in two parts. You have the what's the right term for it? I have it here somewhere on paper. Sales activation. And I think for that you have inbound marketing, lead generation, and that's a part of what you can do, and it can get you results. And then you have the branding part. And for the branding part, I think demand generation, content marketing can be great ways to do that part.
Go ahead. Sorry.
But I don't think you can compare the two. I think it's about investing short term and long term, and I think building a brand should be the highest priority, and then it will result in getting more leads on the short term. But I'm thinking where I wanted to go with this with this story. But I think we are comparing the wrong things. You can do both, and if you only focus on short term, you will not win on the long term. And
it is. My point wasn't to say you shouldn't run ads, or you shouldn't do cold calling, you shouldn't do cold outreach or whatever. My point is to say, when there is data and we have the knowledge has been produced to understand why people buy. And so there's a great book, if you haven't read it, it's called How Brands Grow by Byron Sharp.
Not read it.
So it should be number one on your priority list. Basically, the gist of it is that people buy because of two things. They buy because a brand is mentally available. So it's because people have limited bandwidth. Everyone has to think about other things. And the problem that we're trying to solve for people isn't always the most pressing problems. So when they're ready to solve that problem, we need to be the first thing that comes to mind. And a good example is that if I ask you to name a soda brand, you're going to tell me Coca-Cola. 90-something people are going to 10% of people are going to tell me Coca-Cola. So that's mental availability. The second was physical availability. So how physically available something is, how easy it is to get, and how rare it is or not rare it is, etc. And so that's what people buy. People do not buy by loyalty. This is disproven by facts, by research. People do not buy brands. This is disproven by research most of the time as well.
Can I go? Can we go one back? Loyalty.
Yeah,
I believe you're right for B2C. So, for example, when I have my favorite web shop for 5 years, and then the competitor is 10 euros cheaper, I will switch. But I think for B2B, for example, the agencies that I hire, in most cases, they are agencies of people I know, I like. It's maybe loyalty is not the right term, but it is because I have a relation with that person.
Exactly. But when I say people don't buy by loyalty, it means if you look at the actual reason, it's not loyalty, because what you just described could also be physical availability, right? They're here, they do good work.
Maybe I have their phone number and
exactly. It's easy, pick up the phone. That guy's available. You trust him. That's it. Most buying decisions are made this way. People don't want to sit with 5 companies on 3 different calls and the procurement process and all that stuff. People want to get it over with as quickly as possible. And so when you look at why people buy, and you understand that it's mental availability and physical availability, you know that this is what you need to build. And in a sense, this is what demand gen is doing. It's doing the mental availability part. It's like we need to educate, which I don't think is a right word, and I think it's nonsensical again. But they're just pushing the brand to as many people as possible, as big a part of the market as possible. This is what you should be doing: mental availability. Yeah. And so, which is why I'm saying what works in demand gen isn't demand gen.
Yeah. So branding. Maybe branding is a good word, brand building, whatever, for what people who say they are doing demand generation are actually doing.
Yeah, I think it's all
branding is very old, and it's not at the top of the agenda of a lot of companies. And I think a lot of companies are struggling with some trends and some issues they have with the marketing campaigns or programs that they are doing right now. So the fact that we give it a different name, maybe it's a good thing, because now a lot of people are doing branding and they call it demand generation, but it's something that needs to be done.
So, like I said, I have a few issues with that, and they're mostly, I think, ethical and personal. The first one is, like I said, nonsensical words lead to nonsensical thinking, and so I don't think that's a good thing. That's something I don't want to promote.
But can you stop it? Because let's look at content marketing, for example. Mm-hmm. When I started to look into it, I think 10 years ago, I found out that if I talk to 5 people about what content marketing is, I get 5 different definitions, and they are not even a little bit similar. Everybody has a completely different idea of what it is. Mm-hmm. And I think that's still the case. Maybe it became a little bit better, but it's still the case. But I can't stop the trend. I can't stop the fact that a lot of people want content marketing, are searching for it, are hiring companies for it. So then my approach became, tell me what your definition of content marketing is. And for that company, that's my definition as well. And for another company, I have another definition. Because what we are actually doing in a lot of cases are the right things, are examples of good marketing. And then I don't care what the name is.
Yeah, well, I think that question could have its own episode, its own 1 hour episode. In essence, I agree with your thinking when you say, if in the end we're doing the right things. In the end, if we're doing the right things, does it matter how we call them? I agree with the thinking, but I still disagree with the fact that it doesn't matter what we call them. And this is this is a big question because it has to do with politics, it has to do with linguistics, it has to do with how we perceive the world, etc. If I start talking about a table and I say that this is a table, right? And you tell me, well, this is not a table. And I go like, well, now I'm going to call that a table. Now we all agree. So does it matter? Or you're going to go like, yeah, of course it matters because, language is a social construct and we all need to be clear on what we're talking about, because otherwise we have the wrong mental representations of whatever we're talking about, and it's going to lead to a whole lot of confusion. I'd argue that something similar happens with the demand gen thing, which is why I'm saying it causes confusion in the market. And that's why I'd say I still don't agree that we're welcome to call it any way we want.
I agree with you, but I can't change it either. And that's the hard part.
No, yeah, my goal isn't to change it because I can't change and I don't have that kind of power. I don't even know whether I would like to have it. But At the same time, I think it's important, if I don't agree with something, to be vocal about it and say, look, I don't think this makes sense. And, I've done that, and I've had a lot of people, you included, and we're having this conversation. I think it's going to be helpful to a lot of people as well, and to young marketers as well, who, may be training on the job, to say, some people are actually thinking about this stuff, right? You may agree with me, disagree with me. I don't really care, right? Just let's think about it. Let's see
that's good.
What makes sense and what doesn't, and what we can, right? And I think from a pure marketing standpoint, from marketing my company, because obviously you can always say, yes, but Vince, you have something to sell. Yes, I do. I think these trends, they're leaving a lot of people on the sidelines. A lot of down-to-earth business owners or marketers who don't want to go on LinkedIn because they're tired of seeing this shit over and over again. And having someone saying just like, guys, I think this is kind of BS too. Maybe we can try and think together. That's a marketing stunt for me as well. I'm fine with that. I still think it's important to have diversity.
I agree.
About all these things. Yeah.
But then there's another part, because let's say that demand generation, what it stands for, is a good approach for building a brand. But you can build a brand in a lot of different ways. And there are some digital marketing trends like zero-click content that less people compared to 7 years ago want to fill in a form. The trend that we might have a little bit less data because of the zero-click content problem, because people stay on the platform. Those are all trends for which demand generation became a solution. And I think a good solution, to be honest. Not the term demand generation, but what it stands for. And so it's a good way of building a brand. But building a brand is not exactly the same as what we do for demand generation. So if it's something specific, it has all these things like zero-click content and not gating content and things like that, then it needs a name, I think. Brand building is not enough. It's too broad.
To me, it's just brand awareness. It's just building mental availability. And none of what I've talked so far is rocket science. It's stuff that people have known for decades. Do you think, and I always use the same example, do you think, I don't know, I'm not American, I'm going to say a random beer name, like, Coors or whatever. Do you think these guys are paying $8 million for a 30-second Super Bowl ad so that they can make $14 million in sales the next week or the next quarter? Do you think that's their thinking? Of course not.
No.
They're doing it because they want their brand to be front of mind. Always. Do you think software vendors at SEO conferences are sponsoring parties because everyone there is going to buy the software? No. They're doing it for mental availability. It's just, we know that stuff. So why is everyone acting like we don't? And they just invented the wheel.
Yeah, I have a problem with that part. That a lot of people think they invented the wheel. And that's
or they
also,
act like it.
I added demand generation to my LinkedIn profile because I thought to myself, well, I'm already doing this for a very long time for different companies. And now it's called demand generation. And I know
but it's not about demand. But it's not about demand.
But
and it's not generating anything.
I completely agree with that, but that's what it's called. And
yeah, it is.
Then I come back to I can change it, so I go with the flow.
I understand. That's a valid thinking. And this is why I answered your question earlier by saying this is kind of ethical and personal. Like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And that I'm fine with other people saying, well, you know what? I'm going to choose my battles, man. I'm just going to go with this one. I'm fine with it. Perfect.
And it doesn't mean that I don't tell companies that it's just branding and it's a specific approach for that. But and that's the same thing for content marketing.
I agree.
On the one hand, I ask what the definition of the company is, and then I go with that. But I always also explain what my definition is and what I think content marketing is really about. and then they can choose to go with that or to don't.
Yeah.
I don't care, but I want to tell them what I think it's really about.
Yeah, I think there's another problem in it for me, which is that usually, and that's in the piece as well, in my article, is that usually these people end up having something to sell, right? And
Totally agree.
I'm fine with people having something to sell. That no problem. Everyone does their own stuff. Like I said, I have something to sell, so and this is part of it. If I didn't have something to sell, I wouldn't be talking to you. So the issue that I have here, I'm going to take an example. I've seen, because that demand gen narrative is mostly pushed by LinkedIn ads agencies. Because in the end, it's ads agencies, right, that push the demand gen narrative mostly. And so I've seen on LinkedIn very high profile, highly followed LinkedIn ads owner, LinkedIn ads agency owner, go like, oh, we generated an insane amount, like 800 or 900 inbound meetings this year. I'm like, I'm an agency owner. 800 inbound meetings? Like, this is crazy to me. So, I feel really bad at this. So I looked through the post, and he goes like, step 1, we run cold ads. I'm like, man, I'm sorry, what? You just told me you had 800 inbound meetings, and the first step you do is run cold ads. Whatever's wrong in your mind to mislead people like this? I comment something a little bit more politically correct than this to kickstart a conversation. I'm like, listen, you have an ad strategy and it works. That's great. But do not say this is an inbound marketing strategy, because ads are not part of an inbound marketing strategy. And they go like, oh yeah, but the first touch is ads, and then they read our content, they know us, and then it's an inbound meeting at the end. Like, listen, man, I'm okay with all, the laxist semantic stuff saying, yes, but can't we just call it what we want? But you're outright lying to people at this point, right?
And then we go a little bit back to the beginning of the conversation. What I noticed, well, back to the SEO background, a lot of SEO agencies or digital marketing agencies solve SEO as the solution for everything. Every company should do something with SEO. I don't believe in that. For demand generation, it's now the same. For everything, it's the same. And maybe that's why I don't want to choose. I can help companies with SEO, with content marketing, with inbound marketing, and with demand generation. And if they need something else, I can't help them. And if one of these is good for them, or a combination of them, because I don't see it as a very strict thing. A lot of times when you do demand generation, it's almost always also content marketing. And in a lot of cases, even a little bit of inbound marketing, I think. I just want to give the best solution for each company and not sell something as the fix for every problem.
I agree with that completely, and this is why I'm trying to put a little bit more nuance in this as well. Like, let's think about it for a second and say, oh, what are we actually pushing? Does that work? And what conclusions can we draw? And the conclusions that I think we can draw is exactly what you said: is demand generation is not the ultimate solution to everything. Like, it's pushed by so many companies. The same way content marketing isn't fit for every company. But we're coming back to that 1, 2, 3, right? We're coming back to this. This is an execution discussion that we're having, unless you do 1 and 2, right? And this is kind of the problem that we're trying to solve for people at this moment. Is, let's say, we'll help you do 1 and 2, because right now you haven't been doing any marketing. It's time to start doing marketing for real. And I think if you have the strategy, if you have all of that, if you know who you're targeting and where they are, then you automatically know the approach that you need to choose to, reach these people. And
I think there are a lot of ways to the same goal.
Yeah, definitely.
There's not always one thing that's best.
No, and what I'm fighting, I think, what I'm trying to fight probably is misinformation or people misleading other people. And we see that, like you mentioned, SEO. SEO is a prime example of people having myths that they toss around for whatever reason, and then no one understands what SEO is about anymore. No one knows. Like, you know, I've seen in Slack communities people go like, "Oh, backlinks are 100% the next most important things after the words on the page." I'm like, that's a really bold statement to make in 2023. No, whatever your stance on the matter is, this is really a bold way to phrase it. So then let's question, how does this guy know what he knows? How does he come to that conclusion? And then usually, you know, he just repeats something he heard somewhere else.
What I think the biggest problem with SEO is that people always say that the algorithm of Google is changing every week. And then people think they need a different approach every week. And without the SEO company, they can't do that because they know the algorithm. But when you look at it, it's pretty much the same for a very long time.
Oh yeah,
it's always about
20 years.
Yeah, and of course some little things change, some structured data things or core web vitals.
Yeah, but those are like, it's noise, you know. I mean, it's really important to do that. It's really important for your SEO agency to take care of this, but it's noise. The overall channel hasn't really changed. What I'm amazed by is that people can use ChatGPT for hours and be amazed by what it can do, and still be surprised when they hear that Google has been using LLMs to try and understand content for years. You know, how can you on one hand go like, oh, ChatGPT is so clever, he just wrote me a cookie recipe, and on the other hand go like, oh, Google algorithm is so bad, it just links and nothing else. Do you see the tech is here? Do you think the biggest tech company in the world is not using it? They're fucking built language model.
Somewhere on your blog, I also saw an article about content creation with ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Maybe we can end this podcast with your opinion on that.
Yeah. Well, it depends on what we're talking about again. And I don't have a crystal ball. Like I don't know what's going to happen. I think in the end, I saw a great conference by the French guy who co-invented Siri. I think he worked at Apple back then, so he was really big on all this AA stuff. And he said the conclusion of the conference was like, AI, like a hammer, it's a tool, right? You can use a hammer to put nails on your wall, and you could use a hammer to smash people's head, right? It's possible.
Yeah, I haven't heard that one before, but I like it.
Yeah, so AI is the same. Like, you can use it for good or whatever. You can use it to do great things. And it could be a shortcut. I don't think that in its current state, it is a shortcut to good content creation, but I think it could be a shortcut for sure. The most important thing, and that's the same reasoning with dim and gen and stuff, is people need to understand what this tech is and how it works to understand what it can and what it cannot do. Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think too black and white. When I am pro ChatGPT, they think that I create everything with it and that I just give a prompt and then copy paste it into WordPress. And when I'm against it, people think that I don't use it at all. But it's like the hammer. Sometimes it might be I use it for 2% of the complete piece, and sometimes it might be 15% or maybe even more. When you want to transform content from a transcript to an article, then it can be a high percentage, but it can still be very good and your unique vision. And
I think that's why I'm saying people need to understand what the tech does. And 99% don't understand what LLMs do and how they work. And I'm not an AI expert, but I understand the rough way it works, right? And so, like you said, there are some applications in which it's really, really good. And one of them is taking an existing piece of content and rephrasing it or expanding upon it. That's really good. It's really good at this. For example, I had scraped data from the internet, and I had a set of addresses, US addresses with the state and town and whatever, and I couldn't, run an Excel formula to separate everything because it was the same separator. And I was like, ChatGPT, can you put that back together for me? Like 2 minutes. It would have taken me 2 hours manually. 2 minutes, it does it for me. That's great. But until you understand what it does, you can't use it properly. And what it does is it's a statistical language model. So if you ask it for a keywords list, it's going to give you junk. If you ask it for an outline, it's going to give you junk.
Well, it can be junk. It can be very good, and maybe a part of it is very good.
It is random, right? It's random things.
That's right.
So sometimes it's all good, and sometimes it's really bad.
I think the problem is you can trust it, and you have to check everything you get, and then it still can be very good. I saw a discussion about using ChatGPT to create your buyer personas. And some people are against it. Some people think you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, let's say that I want to create a buyer persona for the IT manager. I think it can be very useful to get to know the IT manager better and to get more different insights from different angles, and then check it with the real customer, with sales, with service. And then I think I will have a better persona at the end than when I just ask these people without ChatGPT. But of course, you can trust it.
You're using it as a tool. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But most people are not thinking about it like that. They're thinking about it as a shortcut to content creation or to whatever. And frankly, the tech in its current state is not good enough to be a shortcut. And it probably never will. This is something that people need to understand as well. It probably never will. But it will definitely be a great tool to speed up the writing and to speed up, ideation, that kind of thing, because it's really good at this. It's really good at giving us what we already have and that we don't know we have, or, it can't create, it can't do anything like that. And maybe I can end on this, you choose whether it's the end or not. Maybe I can end on this, this example that from the conference that I mentioned earlier. Image recognition models need, people were really excited when they first came around, because they were like, oh, with only 100,000 images of cat, I can make a piece of software that recognizes cat with 99% accuracy. That sounds amazing, right? Do you know how many cat images a human needs to see to recognize a cat? Probably 2, right? Right? So we're very, very far from any kind of intelligence. Yes, the tech is amazing. It's amazing what's happening. But we also need to understand that, it's not as amazing as some people make it to be.
Yeah, I think it's going... yesterday I heard a podcast, someone who worked at Google, and he said that it was about the IQ of ChatGPT, of GPT 3.5 and then 4, and then I think GPT-4 is 10 times smarter, has a higher IQ than 3.5. And then he said, imagine what will happen if that goes times 10 as well. And of course, it's not fair to judge ChatGPT based on IQ test because it's trained on that. So it's not fair to compare that based on how a human would do it. But I think a lot of the problems we have right now, that we can't trust it and that there are a lot of mistakes and things like that, can be fixed for a big part. And it can go very quick, because from 3.5 to 4, it was only about 8 months, something like that. So that scares me a bit. I also like it. I'm looking forward to it as well. But
whatever happens, it's still going to be a tool. Like, it's not going to be able to create anything from scratch. It's always going to be something that we prompt. We are still going to be behind the wheel, basically. So I think that's something that's important to keep in mind as well. And yes, I know some people have tried stuff with like Auto GPT and whatever, that kind of self-viewers. I haven't looked into it too much. I know it exists. Yeah, I'm not an AI specialist, and AI specialists seem to be split between the very optimistic ones and the ones who say, well, it's going to be a huge balloon that's going to pop. So I don't know who to trust. And the best thing in that in that situation, in my opinion, is to just not say anything. Like, I don't know how it's gonna go.
Yeah, that's hard to not say anything. But I don't know either.
Yeah,
but yeah, I'm right. You're right. A lot of different experts think very differently about it, and I'm not an expert too. But I like to think about it. Last question. If you could use a time machine and go 10 years back in time, what advice would you give yourself?
Well, that's a tough question. Oh, that's a really tough question, because I can think of several things. I think I'd say this, and it's a little bit of it comes back in my content sometimes. It's the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, and the second best time is now. I think that's a little bit cheesy because it sounds like self-help, whatever. But yeah, if you don't start, you can't fail, which is reassuring, but you can't make it either. So you need to just start. And for the most part, I think I've done okay at this because I have a business and stuff. So I did follow that advice a little bit, but I didn't always. And yeah, I think that could have helped me.
Good one. I use it a lot. This sometimes when you're not sure if you should do something, then I think about this quote and then I do it.
Yeah, because it's always, people don't. You think things matter, and the reality is that most of the time they don't. And I love another analogy, which is when you're not sure whether to make a decision, think of it as a one-way or a two-way door. Is it something that's easily reversible? So it's a two-way door. So in that case, you don't put much thought into it and you just do it. Like, you're going to buy a new car. What if I don't like the car? Just sell the car and buy another car. And that's it. That's a one way. I'm going to make a child. But that's a one-way door, right? You can't unmake the child. So you better put some thought into that. And that helps you, prioritize things in business and in life.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like it. All right. Thanks a lot for the nice conversation. And have a nice day.
Thank you. That was really fun. Yeah, you too.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Inbound4Cast. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or in your favorite podcast app.